So I'll go through the schedule for the week. Have Southern strategy. I thought I'd get through everything, but probably not going to finish the war this week. And so the test, and the thing about it is the test, since we have short periods on Monday, I don't like doing tests on Monday. And I like tests on Monday anyways. I know the same reason you don't, but short periods, I want to make sure everyone gets done. Most of you will, but you know, I want to make sure there's enough time. So the test is going to be on Tuesday. So if everything goes well, I'll finish it on Friday. I'll answer any questions you have on Monday, and then I'm going to start the next unit on Monday. Even though the test will be on Tuesday. Everyone okay with that? You know, but I will answer questions. I will give you a review list for the test. Do you want it today or tomorrow? There will be short essays on the test. I'll tell you exactly my format for short essays. And it's actually I prefer those. I call them short IDs. And I learned way back when I was in college. And I would actually prefer those in multiple choice. I'm not a big fan of multiple choice, even though I got to give them to you. And they are easier to grade. But I don't like them because there's only one answer. And multiple choice are kind of complex. It can be complex. And I have to write them that way. Yeah, question.
One work field, but
So as I said, multiple choice and short essay. Now, a couple of these have asterisks. I want the asterisks could be things for short ID essays. And I'll go over exactly what I want for essays. There's a certain format I want. Because it's a short essay, but also it's a building block to a long essay too. Did I count right this time? Made it. Nailed it. All right. Has anyone not done this yet? Did I give you this? Okay. If you haven't done it, please get it done this week. On the next one. You know what those are worth in the black market? What are you talking about? Can't do that. You can't cut them the way I cut them. Everything. Okay, so please get this done. Because you have to start the AP exam next month. The way it is, it's the world we inhabit. All right. These. You do have a little bit of a reading assignment tonight. Now, in your appendix, the appendix of the textbook. So in your appendix is left side, isn't it? Or the right? Left. Right? In the appendix, that's where they have documents in your textbook. So appendix page A67. So it's in A67 of your textbook. The Declaration of Independence is there. And it's a shockingly short document. I mean, it's a really short document. And we have to read it. We got to talk a little bit about the philosophy. And I'm always interested with philosophy, even though it's kind of overrated a little bit too much. Like it didn't have that much effect while it was written, but still, we have to know. The big thing are the first two paragraphs. The first two paragraphs are the meat of the document, especially the second paragraph where it talks about rights and the social contract. So read that through carefully. You have to read that tonight. It's a short reading. You have to read that. And then you can finish the rest, the grievances for Wednesday. And the grievances, basically, they're going to list everything that they could think of that was going wrong and blame it on the king. And so just kind of go through it. It's actually some, okay, some, it's like, just you name it. They're going to blame the king. But the first two paragraphs have that record of yeah. The grievance is the second part from this. So after you read the, yeah, the declaration. So basically it's rights and then the grievances. The king is depriving us of our rights, and they list them out. He hath, they keep saying, or he has. And so let's go ahead then and finish up. We gotta get to the big one, the T Act, and a couple things we gotta go pretty quick on this. Did we finish right when I talked about ancient Egypt? Is this from what we quit? Does this look right to everybody?
I would want to propaganda, but you didn't talk about it.
I'll talk about propaganda and the Boston Massacre. Is this right where we quit? So let's get going on this real quick. So there's propaganda everywhere. And what they did is after the Boston Massacre, and where were troops living? In whose homes? And we talked about the bed situation, but what else were the troops doing to the colonial, especially the colonial? What's that? Yeah, they're listening, they're spying all the time. So it's always like you have this ending with an and what else? Yeah. James. What? Say it again.
It suffered for they were 18.
Very good. Taking the jobs. Yep. They're taking the jobs, and it was a crisis. They were talking about the Townshend Act, Stamp Act, Congress. And so propaganda, so here's the Patriots. The Patriots want more separation from the British and the colonials. Some are thinking all the way to independence. So they take this and say, okay, here's this horrible affair. 5 people are killed. Accident, almost certainly, but we're going to say, no, we'll imply it's something more. And they want people to believe a certain thing. They want people to believe this was a conscious effort by the British to massacre colonists. Now, yeah, they did shoot a number of them. It was a horrible affair. But, did we mention this? We have this? We did get this part? The thing about this is, propaganda is always biased. This is not like this objective point of view. It's going to lay a certain point of view, and they want to lay the British in the worst light possible. It's not necessarily lying, even though it kind of is by definition. It is deceitful. They are misleading the people by not telling them the whole story. Everybody is biased. Do not forget that. Everybody. Yes. Oh, Christmas Adams. Yeah, that was used as propaganda by the abolitionist movement. That was used by propaganda by the abolitionist movement. There weren't very many abolitionists before the Civil War. Maybe 3 or 4% of the population in reality. But they were trying to say that if they fought for liberty back in 1770, shouldn't they be free now? And it was really pretty effective propaganda because nobody thought that at the time. It was much more complex. And so with that, one more thing about it. Use emotion. There was a shooting. Massacre. Use emotional words. So Paul Revere would make this famous woodcutting. Revere would become famous for a poem long after he was dead about his ride before Lexington and Concord. But it's a massacre. They gunned us down, us patriots. Now, yeah, they killed 5 people out of it. My point of view, especially would have known that's a massacre. But of course, they really emphasize this. Now, the British reaction this time was smart. They realized they had gone too far. They pulled the troops out of Boston. They set up a tent city outside the town, which they should have done in the first place. Remember the thing about the troops. They're always in the homes. They're listening and other stuff. And then they're going to have a trial of the soldiers in Boston. So using English common law, there'll be a jury in Boston of free people. And John Adams, a leading patriot. Now, of course, Adams, this is what you see in Adams will make it clear. They wanted a fair trial. If the colonists are going to represent liberty, then that has to mean liberty for everybody. They will not be hypocrites. John Adams, a leading patriot, and yes, he would be criticized, but there's another reason too. Remember I told you about how so many of the colonial poor lived? Remember the poorhouse I told you? How did they sleep in those houses? Over the rope, meaning misery. Adams, for the time, relatively prosperous in outside of Boston, a little town called Quincy. And, the leading patriots were doing okay. They wanted to do better. They wanted more rights and liberty. They wanted autonomy, control over themselves. But they were really worried that those poor, living in those poorhouses, sure, they might be angry at the British, but what if they also say, yeah, we hate the British. British policy is hurting us. But it seems to be helping those colonial elites. Why do they still have wealth and we don't? Why don't we have a better life? And we have people in Boston who claim to be patriots fighting for us. They live so much better than us. They wanted to focus that anger on the British. And Adams and other leading patriots were worried that the anger might start bleeding over to people like Adams. They were really worried about this. There was a big class issue. So let me give you one quote from Adams's defense of the soldiers. He said, and implying that the soldiers have no choice because look at the people who are surrounding them, throwing horrible things at them. They were a motley rabble of saucy boys, Negroes and mulattoes, Irish teagues, and outlandish jackars. That's a saucy boy. Not a bad boy then. Does anyone know? That's slightly redundant. You know what a saucy boy? Yes.
It's the term.
Not a bad, you're really close, but that was more like a teague or a jackdaw, even though you're on the right track. On the right track. If you go to cities, they're brand new, people, they live in the cities. It's a big shift. On the farm, big families were important because what were kids for on a farm? Yeah, it's labor. You own them, you make them work for you. You're in the city, AKA working for a wage for survival, kids go from being necessary for the farm to function to a major expense. What happens in these towns? You can't afford to care for your kids. Remember what I told you, a lot of people are living in these poor houses. What were they doing to their kids? They find a job for them, can't feed them. Good luck when they're like 8 or 9 and kick them off the street. You go to these areas that are these new urban areas, there's always so many orphans, so many kids that are just been kicked out of them. It's shocking. I mean, it still happens, but it was unbelievable then. So a saucy boy was like, here's these kids roaming the streets and how do they survive? Crime, stealing stuff. Saucy was kind of like this attitude, like they were like little thieves. That's right, they're little thieves. So it's a derogatory comment towards these poor, unfortunate orphans. And acting like, look at them, they're just not fighting. Negro, okay, we know what that is. What's a mulatto? Yes. Yeah, European and African ancestry. Remember we talked about the fornication laws. This was all the time. But racism had taken hold. Racism is so new, but it's amazing how fast it took hold. To them, if they're Negro and mulattoes, what does that mean? They're what? Inferior. A jackdaw. Oh, no, Irish teague. That's two terms. A teague is somebody on low ships. So we said about the lowest form, that's like the lowest job on the dock. They would hang around the docks and try to get these jobs for little piece work. They get a little bit of pay for unloading ships. The lowest level job. So they already got the low level. And to Englishmen, they brutally colonized Ireland. So to justify colonizing colonizing Ireland, they acted like the Irish were what? Yeah, inferior, separate, and later on they say a separate race where the term is even used. So they're inferiors. And a jack tar is the lowest setting. Tar is the lowest level setting. So what is he saying? This low class attack. They have. And so it's important to understand here, they're trying to get this class under control. And they talk about this a lot. We got to control them all. We got to control them all. If they wrote the Declaration of Independence, it was like, we got to control this mob. They want this crazy thing called democracy. Control, control, control. So that's what he did. Now, 8 of them would be found guilty, manslaughter. I'm sorry, 5 of them found guilty of manslaughter. They threw themselves to the church for punishment. This is still very common. So we think of punishment. All of us know, like, for example, if you commit a crime, there's a chance you might get a fine, maybe in prison, they have sentences. I say that, you know what I'm talking about. That had not even been created. Sentences, punishment would be very much up to the judge and the jury. It could be corporal punishment like being in the stocks. It could be execution. It could be imprisonment. It could be exile or manslaughter if they were branded with an M on their thumb. Yeah. And that's all. So that's what happened. They got an M branded on their thumb. So the Townshend Acts would be repealed. This is always going to be an issue. The elite patriots were trying to control the mob, who wanted crazy things like housing and guaranteed wages and the right to decide their own leaders. This would be a big issue. And also, out of this, people started writing this propaganda and spreading it. And this out of that, spreading this propaganda would become groups of like-minded patriots called the Committees of Correspondence. And they would spread information down by writers. Paul Revere was one of them. And they would spread this propaganda. So, for example, if there is a ship that stops smuggling tea called the Gaspee right here, we're not going to talk about class, they can spread the information. Or, let's say some tea is thrown overboard in Boston. Through a like-minded patriots, the propaganda could be spread like a lightning fast through the colonies. Committees of Correspondence. And so, with that, the British still have their problem. And so, in 1773, one more attempt to try to get the Navigation Acts. We'll ignore the other commodities. The Navigation Acts are essentially now ignored. Townshend Act repealed, Stamp Act gone, the Tea Act. The East India Company was a joint stock company that controlled British India. In fact, they would control British India. Colonial India for Britain would be owned by a company until 1850. Yes. Well, they're a corporation. East India companies are corporations. They're not a superpower. You say maybe Britain could be a superpower. But this is a massive corporation. It was pretty close. Now, they were going broke. And so they decided to give them a monopoly on tea sales. There were many stockholders of this tea company, of the East India Company, who were in Parliament. So they were passing laws to benefit themselves. This is what we call a conflict of interest. Imagine members of the United States Congress today passing laws to benefit their own, let's say, stock portfolio. Could you imagine that happening today?
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, there's an effort to get a law passed to actually say they can no longer do that. Own stock and buy and sell stock and because they're making money. So let's put it this way. In the past, we see it down the road. In fact, now Britain is like, boy, we thought we were corrupt, but moving on. Yeah, it kind of irritates. So they're going broke. Britain is going through the process doing the same thing. They're trying to force people in Britain to drink tea. I don't seem so weird because we think of the British drinking tea, but they had to kind of coerce them to do it. There was an epidemic as Britain became urbanized, the Industrial Revolution was just beginning. So many people were poor, desperate, trying to basically self-medicate, that there was an epidemic of gin drinking, that distilled spirit. And so they're trying to get them to quit drinking gin and drink tea. Just kind of this weird stuff is going on. They're trying to thing in the colonies. So tea was just starting to pick up in popularity, partially coercion. We'll give them a monopoly. And they'll collect the taxes. So the British East India Company, BEIC, will collect the taxes. And then they will give licenses to merchants within the colonies to sell tea. Therefore, they'll collect the taxes. Certain merchants will sell tea and certain ones will be iced out. And you can imagine what that means. Friends of the company, friends of the governor, of the royal governor, they would get the licenses and patriots would be iced out. I like the old symbol of the East India Company. I think that's kind of cool. One on the top. The other one on the bottom, that would be in the mid-19th century. Normally, if there's a monopoly for a product that people want, but it's still not quite the phenomenon that's coming. Normally, if there's a monopoly, what would happen to the price? It would go up. But in the short run, ironically, the price is going to go down. And that's what Britain thought, okay, we'll get them because the prices go down to be more efficient. We can sell more. It's kind of like the Walmart or Amazon factor. They operate very much like monopolies. In fact, Amazon is a monopoly. And for some things, the price is lower, but they are also raising the prices for other services. And that's how it's starting to go, that lower price is going away. But same thing's happening here. The big reason why is because all the people selling tea were smugglers, and it undercuts the smugglers. The smugglers charge a premium for the danger they have for selling tea. I mean, the same thing now. You know, people who deal in drugs, let's say, charge a premium because they have to deal with the police. During Prohibition in the United States, when they tried to ban alcohol in the 1920s, organized crime exploded. Why? Drinking went down, but the alcohol they sold, they could jack the price because they're taking the risk. So when Montana partially legalized cannabis, nobody was more upset than drug dealers because it undercuts them. And so with that, this is what happened. So guys like John Hancock, who were cleaning up saying, I'm avoiding the tax, so you have to pay more. All of a sudden now they're losing business. He became a patriot. He had a lot of money. So Sam Adams realized we need this guy. I'm going to give him power. Well, I'm going to make him think he has power. So they undercut them. And so the issue was though, everyone's going to say, we see this, I see this time after time. And there was a phenomenon about 2009, 2010 here called the Tea Party movement. And it was this anti-tax thing, and they just, because it's a bad reading of history. No, monopoly was the issue. The tax, they didn't like the tax. But it wasn't the tax itself, it's control. Who will decide this? And if they can give a monopoly of tea, what else can they give a monopoly on? What other friends of members of parliament could they give a monopoly and destroy colonial industry? And if anybody in the colonies complained, they could get rid of their government. They could rule by decree. You complain too much, we'll shut your businesses down. We can ruin you. We can ruin your way of life. You will become nothing more than slaves. And they started using this, you might have heard of this, called the slippery slope. Now, this is misused a lot, but still, there's an element of truth here. If they can get rid of the monopoly. Now, they said the same thing, or get rid of independent smugglers selling tea. What's next? Everything we do, how we make a living, they will crush and destroy. Our rights are being taken away. if we allow this. They said the same thing for the Sugar Act, they said the same thing for the Stamp Act, they said the same thing for the Township. But of course, now patriots could say, see, look what they're doing. We were right all along. What's next? And so here, that's where then we got to our liberty is being taken away. Our rights. And we are becoming slaves. Now that's interesting from a colony, many of them had a lot of slaves. And Boston merchants, even though there wasn't a lot of slavery, we're making a lot of money off of slaves. And this should get us to one thing. I have to emphasize this time after time. They knew slavery was wrong. Yes, they had slaves. Yes, a lot of them wanted it. Yes, there had been slavery before, even though it's different in the colonies. But that didn't mean they didn't know it was wrong. And they all didn't want to be slaves. They hated it. They knew slavery was wrong. And so if anybody says, oh, well, everyone had slaves, so they didn't think it was that bad, so we can't judge them today. No, they knew slavery was wrong because they used it for example, they used it as something they didn't want to be. So they said this. And okay, so here, tar and feather and jumping tea down his throat to a merchant. Here, Boston Harbor. Here's a sign that about the tea tax. And remember I told you how they made S's? They like this one. It's always impossible for me to read this. You may depend that those odious miscreants. So look at the S. That's supposed to be miscreants. That's an S, and that's an S. So they use both different ways. It was the artistic license of the printer. Ministry? Oh, sorry. It's really hard to tell. Let's find an F in here.
I therefore.
Yeah, fellow.
There's I therefore give you.
Detestable. I know.
So it's exactly.
I don't even know what word that is. It's supposed to be shortest, but. All right. So that is going to lead to the famous December 16th, 1773 Boston Tea. So you can imagine how the Sons of Liberty and these groups are really portraying this as, if we let those ships in, what's going to happen? One ship had already tried to come in and dock, and it was met by Sons of Liberty who threatened them, and they didn't dock in Boston. They actually went down to Connecticut and docked. But two ships arrived, the Eleanor and the Beaver. And these were East India Company teas, ships. They've been going over a year, almost a year, to get from India to Boston. And what a trip that was. A long haul by a sailing ship. Yeah, the 1870s, yeah. Just had to go all the way here. This way, I mean, they could do this way, but then this is a pretty treacherous trip around here. And the Pacific Oceans. And so they're docked, but they're scared to unload it. The crews are on board the ships. These kind of fat galleys, there's those ocean-going vessels. And the Sons of Liberty are going to hold a big rally at North Hall. So here's a picture of North Hall. It's a picture from, what year was that? 2006, I think I took that picture. Really cool. If you get a chance to go to Boston, North Hall was a meeting hall. It was loosely designed in a Puritan church. It's big, open area. Now it's, because this is where the Tea Party started. It's a historical site. It's really cool. Back then, it was about 100 yards from the harbor. Today, it's about a quarter mile, because much of the area that used to be water in the 1830s and 40s, they took hills, put the hills in wheelbarrows and dumped it in the water. So they filled that in to make room for Boston. So it's a little bit further away. They had a meeting, and in this meeting, they got the people all riled up. And they said, when these ships land, If you allow this to happen, it is only step one for you losing everything you have, everything you fought for. You're gonna be nothing but slaves and getting people fired up. And as they do it, they're passing around rum, so they're getting really fired up. And what are we gonna do? Are we gonna allow this? And then all of a sudden, the doors swing open and all these sons of liberty come running in. Dressed as what? Mohawks. Now, of course, everybody knew Mohawks who lived in the Finger Lake region right here of New York colony at the time. No, they're not. They're not gonna come to Boston. They knew they weren't Mohawks. Why'd they dress as Mohawks? Everyone knew they were, even though it's a good guess, but. Say it again. Not a bad idea, but no, it's even, yeah,
They does stand to.
no. Good, all those are very good answers, but it's even something more basic. When the Europeans arrived in the New World, they had never seen anything like the way that American Indians lived. They were more free than anything they'd ever seen before.
Symbolism.
Exactly. It symbolized liberty. It was liberty. But they had never seen anything like it. Here are people living with freedoms they couldn't even comprehend. In Europe, everything was a hierarchy. Certain people were on top, and it kind of went all the way down. Here, it seemed like almost everybody was free and equal. And it was also very weird, men and women. It was unbelievable to them. So they symbolized liberty. So if you ever see the symbol of the United States, you see the eagle. The talons of the eagle has arrows. That is a legacy of that attitude. And it also gets to the contradiction of the way that European settlers thought of American Indians. They're liberty and more free, and we're very jealous of them, and we should idolize them. It led to many of the ideas of the Enlightenment. At the same time, we want to steal their stuff and take their land. And on that happy note, we declare independence tomorrow. But I mean, you're not. Sure. Have a good day, everybody. Right when you find work, ping by your thumb. Bye. Can someone get one like, please? We have a quiz. Hope everyone did well on the quiz. Everyone did well.
See you tomorrow, Mr. Partridge.
See you.